sweet. Okay, that's okay. You're here. You're here. Hi, everyone. I know there's so much networking. I'm a huge fan. If you want to keep getting to know each other and giving each other jobs, I'm all for it. Okay. So welcome tonight. I am Cindy Lin. I'm the executive director of the Ziffren Institute for Media, Entertainment, Technology, and Sports Law. I am here with Malaika. Well, I'll let you, why don't you talk a little bit about yourself before I jump into the program. She's wearing my favorite sweater that UCLA has, so that was one comment I wanted to make. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for being here. My name is Malaika Combe. I am a 1L representative for the Black Law Student Association. I'm also part of the Critical Race Studies specialization. Yeah, thank you all for being here. This is going to be a really powerful film. Balsa is super proud to co-sponsor this event, and I hope you all enjoy.
So a little bit about the other organization. So we're really excited. Thank you so much that Balsa is sponsoring this event with us. It's especially exciting when we get a student organization to sponsor events with us, so thank you. Other organizations sponsoring this event, and you'll see all the logos, and so I'm going to read them in order. The Critical Race Studies Program is also sponsoring this event. The David J. Epstein Program in Public Interest Law and Policy. Of course, our documentary film legal clinic, and if Dale and Lauralee, if you can just stand up, actually. We're just doing that. There will be more standing later, and Lauralee is one of our panelists, but this film is very special to us at the Ziffren Institute and the Documentary Film Legal Clinic because it was a client of ours, and so we saw a lot of the development of the process and asked some hard questions about the film before it came out. And of course, the Ziffren Institute for Media, Entertainment, Technology, and Sports Law. If anybody can repeat it to me, I will give you another churro. So this is a unique opportunity for all of us to come together, students, faculty, alums, community members, to get to know each other, to learn about each other's interests, and to engage in a really meaningful discussion about this film after we watch it together. It's also a unique opportunity for UCLA Law to showcase its amazing programs and institute, and it's such a corporate word, but I think it's appropriate, how synergistic we can be and we are. Everybody's cringing, it's okay. So I won't take that much time because we're here to watch a movie. So we're going to begin with the movie screening. Then we will have a discussion led by our two moderators, Jaslene Coley and Karen Wong. I'll tell you a little bit more about them and our panelists later. And on that note, if we can start the film, that'd be cool. And then I will turn off my little light. Thank you, everyone. Have my speakers and moderators take a seat in any order. Any order. And then we need the Zoom link. And then to the James Bridges staff, I don't know if we have the Zoom link or the background slide ready. I'll talk while we, oh, hi LaToya. Can you see us?
I can see.
Yes. Oh, we can't hear you. Could be an issue, whoever I'm waiting to upstairs. I'm going to take, oh, no, it's good.
Can you hear me now?
Can't hear you. This is part of the show, the okay, let's try again.
Testing. Testing.
See that you're saying test, but we cannot hear it. We could do like fun lip reading where I just narrate what I think you're saying. It says it's really late.
Are you still
okay,
not
well,
able to
I'm going to
see
go
me?
ahead and
Hear me?
introduce our other panelists and moderators while we figure out the tech. And then once we can hear, Professor Baldwin Clark, then we'll hear her and then we'll be able to say hi. So thank you all for that wonderful film. I just want to first do one more round of applause. Okay, so the joy of photographer who has produced over 100 films ranging across history, art, poetry, and science, and he's won every award in the field of documentary television. That's wild. Including 2 Alfred I. DuPont Awards, 3 George Foster Peabody Prizes, 5 Writers Guild Prizes, and 10 Emmys. Our first moderator for tonight is Jasleen Coley. She is the executive director for the Critical Race Studies program and at UCLA Law, and it's the first law school program of its kind dedicated to incorporating critical race theory into legal scholarship, teaching, and practice. Ooh, that sounded good. We heard the speaker test. Should we try again? Hello?
Test, test, test.
Oh my gosh, yay! Excellent. Perfect. Okay. Offering permanent training for the next generation of legal advocates and scholars committed to racial justice. Jasleen has practiced in the areas of civil rights, labor law, and policy development, and she co-teaches a course entitled Community Lawyering and Low-Wage Worker Organizing, drawing on her interest and background in law and organizing, social movement lawyering, and the intersection of racial and economic justice. Next on next on screen, Professor Latoya Baldwin Clark. Hello. Assistant Professor of Law at UCLA Law School. Previously, she was an Earl B. Dickerson Fellow and a lecturer in law at the University of Chicago Law School. She writes and teaches about everything that happened in the movie. Education law, family law, property law, and race and discrimination. Professor Clark's publications have appeared or will appear in the Virginia Law Review, Harvard Civil Rights Civil Liberties Law Review, Sociological Inquiry, The Modern American, and Encyclopedia of Diversity in Education, among others. And she's joining us from New York. Thank you so much. All right, next in line, Bo Lam. Hi, Business and Legal Affairs Assistant at MGM Studios. Bo Lam served as a student clinician in the UCLA School of Law's Documentary Film Legal Clinic in the spring of 2021 as part of her entertainment law specialization. Bo earned her first law degree from the University of Birmingham in the United Kingdom. After graduation, she worked at the Walt Disney Company, where she developed the passion for film and television production. She currently works at MGM Studios' Scripted TV Business and Legal Affairs Department, where she assists studio executives in their negotiations pertaining to the development and production of scripted TV projects. And I would like to add, because of the great experience she's gotten at the Documentary Film Clinic, she's able to do that very well. So, Bo Lam. Next, we have Laura Lee Sundra. She's a frontline fellow for the Documentary Film Legal Clinic here at UCLA. In addition to full-time clinic instruction, Laura Lee has been developing the clinic's documentary filmmakers legal education program with the goal of expanding the clinic's pro bono outreach in collaboration with film festivals and media organization events. And I believe we'll attend a film festival soon in Montana, Big Sky. Prior to joining the clinic in January 2021, Laura Lee practiced media and entertainment law for over 20 years with the boutique law firm of Leopold, Petrich, and Smith, and more recently as a member of the nationally recognized media and entertainment group of Ballard Spahr. In addition to her clinic instruction, Laura Lee teaches media law courses at UCLA Extension and regularly leads presentations on topics in media, entertainment, and intellectual property. And if I could have Dale and Dan just stand up real quick. Too quick. Dale and Dan also lead the Documentary Film Clinic with Laura Lee, so I just wanted to acknowledge them. Thank you so much for everything that you do. Finally, Karen Wong. Hi. Oh, good. Is our executive director of the David J. Epstein Program in Public Interest Law and Policy and a professor from practice. It's a unique specialization that trains and mentors the next generation of public interest lawyers. Prior to joining UCLA, Wong advocated for the civil rights and immigrant rights for more than 20 years. She was the longtime vice president of programs and communications at Asian Americans Advancing Justice, where she oversaw its litigation, legal services, policy advocacy, pro bono, and communication strategies. All right. So on that note, I'm going to toss the mic to the first moderator who wants to kick us off.
Thank you, Cindy. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight and enjoying such a powerful film. I've seen it more than once now, but it strikes you just as hard, after the first time as well. I'm going to acknowledge that the film touches on so many things. And as I was watching here tonight, I actually kept thinking of other things I wanted to ask the panelists, but unfortunately, we know we stand between you and food. And so we will try to just touch on a few of the key issues with our wonderful panel here. And I'm going to start with the first question. So my first question is to David. And I was really struck by both the lawsuit and the film as being essentially forms of storytelling. I think that was actually directly said at one point in the film, about the lawsuit, but clearly documentary filmmaking is a form of storytelling. So why don't we start by having you tell us about, how and why did you decide to focus on the Lanier family story, and what were you trying to tell in making this particular film?
Okay. Yeah. Well, first, I just want to thank you for having me here. And I would thank each of these groups, but it confuses me how, what they all are. And they're somehow a part of the law school, which is amazing. And it's amazing that there's a clinic at the law school that helps poor documentary filmmakers to make these things. It really is quite amazing that you do that. So thank you so much for all your help in making this film. So how did I get started on this film? My cousin is Mike Koskoff. And Mike called me one day and he told me about this story. And he said, I said, of course, this sounds amazing, but I'd like to meet Tammy. And when you meet Tammy, you know right away you want to do this film because she's just a terrific woman, and she's going to persevere. She has real integrity. And so I had a character that I believed in, and I knew Mike. We didn't know he was ill at the time, but I knew he loves to litigate, and he would be a good character. And at that point, I saw the film as a kind of a David and Goliath story. Harvard's the most, with the wealthiest, the oldest, some would say the most prestigious. And here's Tammy going, and here's Tammy who's going up against this giant. So I thought that was going to make a good story. I knew that there were going to be issues that came up, but honestly, you really can't predict all of that, and you're really going for the story that embodies the issues. And as I was watching it here tonight, I was thinking, God, I was laying so many issues on people, and I hope the story carries it. What comes out of a film like this, embodied in her stories, you can talk about white supremacy, you can talk about reparations, you can talk about cultural appropriations, you can talk about photographs, you can talk about institutional racism. You can talk about the law and justice. So here we are at the law school, and I assume that's where we will be going, but the reparations could figure, all of these issues come out in story form, and they're all in there. And it's laying a heavy trip on the audience. And I think this is a great audience to, for this kind of a film. So I was thrilled to show it here.
Thank you so much for that. So my question is for Professor Baldwin Clark. As Cindy mentioned, this film really touches upon so many of the areas that you research and think about and teach in. So just given your background and your expertise in property, family law, and the legacy of racism, how do you feel this case in this film illustrates the continuing legacy of slavery, especially in the continuing impact on Black families? And how do you think we should look at this case in the context of current efforts to secure reparations for slavery?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. And I apologize that I can't be there in person. One of the things that I was just so struck by in the film was this concept of disinheritance. So Ms. Lanier, like many Black people, have been disinherited from sharing in the profits and the legacy of what came out of chattel enslavement. And chattel enslavement particularly built this country and bestowed these unfair and immoral profits in order to further white supremacy. Um, and this case is so interesting because what we know is that enslaved people who were property who had no claim to their own body. And so with Papa Renty, he did not choose to take these photos, but he was forced to do so because he was seen as a animal, really, who was not endowed with particular human rights, but was a piece of property for which folks could do whatever it was that they wanted. And of course, this legacy still lives with us, not just the legacy of loss, but also the legacy of theft. And this photo, this daguerreotype, is literally evidence of the dehumanization associated with the expropriation of slave labor. And as we know, that stolen labor is critical to building this country and continues to be unrepaired as long as those ill-gotten gains are sequestered away from Black people. Now, the argument about reparations is usually that it's administratively impossible. How do we know who should benefit when slavery happened so long ago? And of course, I sincerely question that reparations is at all impossible. As long as folks are still profiting from that stolen labor, time should really be no bar. And the legacy of chattel slavery is evident everywhere. Now, of course, this case is much simpler. Here we have a direct descendant of an enslaved person who's trying to claim just a little bit of repair. And from my point of view, thinking about even family law, it's not only that Ms. Lanier was disinherited from sharing in the property profits of in chattel enslavement, but she's literally been disinherited from claiming her family. She talks about how she can see her family in these photos. She calls him Papa Renty, not just Renty. She calls him as part of her family. And what we know is that one of the most pernicious aspects of chattel slavery was the decimation of Black families, the complete tearing apart of family ties. We know that children were actually sold away from their parents, husbands from wives, families completely torn apart in order to further white supremacy. And of course, the thought was that Black people don't have strong family ties, which of course ignored the wailings of Black mothers as their children were being wrenched away from them. And hundreds of formerly enslaved people after emancipation actually attempted to connect with their families, sometimes successfully, but most often not. And so I think what we need to do is recognize that the photos of Papa Renty and his daughters and the other enslaved people in the portfolio are images of Black family members. In slavery, Ms. Lanier would have no legal claim to her family. But to return the daguerreotypes is not just about money and profit, as she's spoken about, but actually an extraordinary attempt to reclaim family that chattel slavery tried so hard to break up. And she's here now, a direct descendant, again, not asking for money or for fame or anything other than just reclaim the family that slavery actually stole. I think I answered your question. Was there another part that I missed?
No,
there?
I think that was great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, LaToya. So I'm going to ask the next question, but I realize we should say that we should have time for some questions from the audience. And so I feel like in all these answers, I feel like there's also follow-up questions you might want to ask. So please save your questions when we get through a round of questions here. We'll take questions from the audience. So for the next question, I'm going to turn to Bo and Laura Lee, and I am going to ask you a little bit more directly about what was referenced earlier. So UCLA has this fabulous documentary film legal clinic, and that clinic helps filmmakers like David tackle difficult legal issues that arise during the course of making a film. For free Renty, for both of you, tell us what specific intellectual property issues did you work on, especially regarding Harvard's ongoing effort to retain and control the use of the images that were the heart of the lawsuit?
I'll start. I'm probably loud enough, but just in case. Bo was a clinician, as Cindy already explained in the documentary Film Legal Clinic, when David came to the film clinic with his incredible film. And it was an extraordinary opportunity to explore some really important issues, and issues that we deal regularly with in the clinic, ones that sort of surround all types of content and how content can be used in film. And just so I can put the definition out there, is we oftentimes refer to these bits and pieces that you see throughout here as archival content. And much of documentary film includes archival content, photos, footage, clips that are not made by the filmmaker, but that are used to tell a story. Raw material to, in this case, present a historical story, a very important one. And I think the journey of this film is particularly troubling because it presents a really poignant example of how copyright in particular can be used by powerful people and institutions, in this case, Harvard, to try to suppress speech. The history surrounding these disturbing images prior to Tammy's involvement was really told only by Harvard and through the lens of the institution that was complicit in the creation of these disturbing images. And they continue to control and profit from the daguerreotypes to this day. And just, I wanted to touch a little bit on David's history and some of the work he's done, but he's done a lot of historical documentaries. And documentaries preserve and are meant to preserve important events, but also create dialogue around these important events. The daguerreotype in this case it's really an unavoidable link to this history. And it is really the centerpiece of this entire story. And it's so important that it feature prominently in this story to provide a better understanding of its place in history. A window backwards, as it were, but also for today and the future to understand how this fits in. And I think in particular, in matters of public interest, when we're delving into these difficult issues, copyright favors the First Amendment and bringing forth stories that are in the public interest. And I don't think any of us in this room can argue that this is one of them. In particular, the film mentioned that David was not able to access people from Harvard to speak to, including professors and also the president. And this in particular was and is part of the story and was a demonstration of how Harvard was seeking and still seeks to control the narrative around these images, when really, is it their story to tell? And I think the ugly truth is that Harvard really doesn't want the story to be told. And I think they want to frame it, and we can't really hope to understand the extent of the harm without understanding these photos and really seeing these photos. So David came to the clinic looking for help with those archival pieces and what he'd be able to use in the film, what he could fair use in the film without having to worry about licensing or permissions. And the daguerreotypes really featured very prominently in those questions and in that inquiry. Although the daguerreotypes were created in 1850, and they are therefore in what we call the public domain, which means they don't need to be licensed. They can be used freely by anyone. Because Harvard continued to control the actual original daguerreotypes, they're really the only institution who's control over what's done with them, including creating better copies of them, high resolution images of them, which I think for purposes of this film, we needed to see the deepest quality that we could so that these images resonate and they really tell this story appropriately. So I'm just going to hand it off to Bo Lamb. She was one of the clinic alums who worked with a team of 2 others to look into the issues of how these images could be used in the film, and provided guidance to David and his team in using not just in the film, but also in some of the promotional material that in part you saw with some of the RSVPs and the images outside.
Thanks, Lorley. So my team and I were one of those in the clinic for the spring semester in 2021. And what was special to us about this project in particular was, we were faced with the question of how can we help David and his team gain the confidence to be able to use these images, or the high resolution version specifically, in the documentary. So they were able to get lower resolution versions, from other sources online, but ultimately it was important to them that the high resolution ones be used, because that tells, the story in its full version, and you're able to really see the detail and be impacted by the image. So my team and I, we dug through a lot of cases, and we were able to discover that the higher resolution images don't warrant a new copyright protection. And that's really huge, because that, gives David and his team the opportunity to be able to present these images, in their full clarity for the audience to see. And I think it's really impactful, in a case like this where Harvard is trying to control the narrative. They even gave, restrictions like a licensing agreement before you had to download the images. Like, you can't crop the images, you can't overprint them. They had to be a certain pixel. You can't blow them up too big. All of these restrictions that were placed before you could even download these images. It just shows that they want to control how the story is told. So how we advised David and his team was basically using the lower resolution images. That's of course a safer approach. But we also recognize that there wouldn't be a valid copyright claim just because, the lower resolution, or the original daguerreotypes are already in the public domain. So since the newer versions, they're based on the older versions, even though they're a new work, they don't encapsulate that, requisite originality that's involved to be necessary to, warrant a new copyright. So that's what we told David and his team. And I'm so glad, that you were able to use those images. It's very powerful. Yeah.
Thank you. Takes a lot of work to figure this stuff out, and we can't do it. And Chris Wolf, who's back there, who was in charge of all this stuff. Yeah, he relied on Bo and on the documentary clinic to feel secure.
Yeah, I also want to give a shout out to, my teammates. They're not here today, but they're Ali Kolsky and Christopher Adler. I miss them. We had a great experience in the clinic. I just like to share for you all, maybe you're already in the clinic or you're thinking of applying to be in it. It was honestly the highlight of my time at UCLA Law, because the professors, they're so encouraging, and, you dive into the deep end, you don't know much about this field, but they guide you through it, and you learn so much from this experience. But yeah, at that time I was in the clinic, we were in the pandemic. It was all over Zoom, but it was a perfect opportunity to, collaborate with my colleagues, and yeah, I'll never forget it.
Thanks, Bo.
Thank you so much for that. It was really, really helpful to think about both the legal issues surrounding the making of the documentary, as well as the legal issues that the documentary brings up. Obviously, we know that the legal issues in making the documentary, we were able to work through and create the documentary. Unfortunately, the case itself has not had such a happy resolution. So, David, I'd love to hear from you just how the film ends before the legal case actually wound its way through the courts. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened after the film ended regarding the specific lawsuit?
I wish I could have given you a happy ending right here. And, you know, I was always focused on the issue of justice, on the moral arguments, obviously. And the legal arguments were very dense, but they did boil down to who owns a photograph. And as the judge ruled, the common law says that the subject of the photograph is owned by the photographer, which is baffling in a lot of ways. It does sidestep all the moral questions. So we couldn't get a happy ending there. The next stage was the appeal to the Massachusetts Supreme Court, where there's about 7 or 8 justices. And if you want to, you can actually read that case, you can see it. And if you go to our website, you'll see the excerpts, which I think tell the story. And what you see there is this same Harvard lawyer being hammered by the justices with questions which I'm sure are in your minds. Okay, does a photographer always own the image? What if they say to him, what if a rapist takes a picture of his victim? Does he own the picture? What if a child pornographer takes a picture of his victim? Does he own the picture? I mean, come on, guys. And the guy had no answer to that. I mean, he was kind of stunned that they were doing it because this judge never put that to him. And you see him like he doesn't have an answer. On the other hand, when they ask what the property claims are to this picture, when they ask Benjamin Crump and Josh Koskoff, they can't nail it down either. So, you know, you guys can understand this better than I can. The way they came to their ruling, you know, in other words, as I say, I was interested in the justice side, and I guess if you're into critical race theory, you can put that in big context. And, you know, our friend here, who I'd love to have met, could do that. But in the legal side of it, they kind of split the baby, and they said, well, Harvard has to keep the picture, but Tammy can sue Harvard and sue him big time. In other words, the language was something like Harvard was reckless in their disregard for their needless disregard for Tammy's emotional distress, something like that, which means punitive damages, was explained to me. Yeah.
Good way of doing it, Dave.
Okay, so that's where it stands now. So Tammy is now about to sue Harvard, and Harvard will probably want to settle. We don't know. I don't know how they're going to handle all that. But Harvard's already, you know, denying her suit. Again, I don't know how that's all done, but I think if you have a lot of money, Harvard has a lot of money, you just keep it going. You just have a way of keeping it going. And again, I don't know the law. I'd be filming this for another 10 years. So I thought that I had all the issues on the table when this ended. I hoped it would have been a happy ending, but I did feel that all the issues are there, including the legality versus justice and the morality, so that I could end it and we could, you know, discuss what would happen later. Now that it's in distribution, let's say this case was settled 10 years from now. Can I get it back and add the end? I'm going to let my lawyers handle that.
Thank you, David, for updating us. Although it's not the answer I think most of us want. I know immediately when I first screened this, the first thing I did was go on Google to find out what happened, what happened when it went up on appeal. So, what happened in the Supreme Court decision is basically, you heard her say, Tammy said many times that what she really wanted was the images, the actual images in her hand, right? The images of her family members, and she was denied that, although I hope she gets a whole heck of a lot of damages for emotional, distress from Harvard. I have a question then, I think piggybacking on this to Professor Baldwin Clark. Somewhere I think in there, I forgot who said it, but in the film, I was struck that someone said the lawsuit is a means to an end. And so to Professor Baldwin Clark, what does this case, both the film and the post-film outcome of the lawsuit, tell us about the limits of the legal system in serving justice? David, you said you did this film because you were hoping to tell a story of justice, but the legal system doesn't always end up acting on the side of justice, especially, I think, particularly racial justice. So Professor Baldwin Clark, I'm sure you have some thoughts on this.
Sure, I do. So one of the things that I was really struck by the whole time during the film was this idea about Harvard doing the right thing. And often what we hope is that the law forces people to do the right thing. We bring lawsuits when we believe that we've been wrong. We hope the law will be able to vindicate us and give us the thing that we're looking for. But I think what we found in this case is that, of course, that's not always what happens. But what the law can do is be a spark. And what I hear from this is that the law was a spark. The law was bringing suit was a spark to put this into the public eye. It was a spark to bring voices like Attorney Ben Crump. It was a way of bringing more and more attention, not to just this issue, but to the legacy of these very elite universities and colleges and the reparations that are due to those whom they have profited off of over the last several hundred years, right? So it is disappointing that the law in and of itself doesn't give justice, but unfortunately, our legal system is not really set up to give racial justice and in particular, right? Although I think that in a way it's okay. As lawyers and even teaching our law students, we have to know that the law is a limited tool. It is just a tool in a larger toolbox of trying to get to justice. And the law is not always going to get us all the way there. But the law, I think, can be a very good starting point and a tool that helps us get towards justice. I was actually on Twitter and Tammy and I have been in contact for the last couple days. And she very much, my sense is that she does feel like the law gave her a push. The law gave her something so that she can now go and vindicate trying to get something from Harvard that was stolen from her. And while the law didn't get her all the way there, the law didn't get the images in her hands. The law hopefully is going to get her something to start to repair the damage, not only of the photos themselves, but of what Harvard has done and has refused to do, and actually talking with her and giving her the things that it is that she needs. I've been very pleased to have been in contact with her. I don't know her personally, and you can only know what you can through Twitter. But the things that she's put out there, she did put out the Massachusetts Supreme Court opinion, and she felt, it seemed to me, very strongly and vindicated by the things that the Supreme Court justices said that will help her go forward in order to get some sense of reparation, even if it is not the actual images themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, that was a really great way for us to also segue to the audience and to see if the audience also has any questions.
Real quick, everyone make sure.
Administratively, no, Professor Baldwin Clark can only hear the audience if you have a mic. So we have mic runners. Yeah,
Exactly what I was going to say. Thank you very much.
thank you.
I see Tyler has a question too.
We have a lot of questions. No?
I actually want to follow up, Latoya, on what you just said, and in particular about the case. You know, they brought a whole bunch of different theories, and they were very creative about it. The Massachusetts Supreme Court seized on emotional distress. I'm curious whether or not there are other cases in other states that have been triggered or sparked by this ruling from the Massachusetts Supreme Court. What are you seeing elsewhere besides just this case?
So I can't say that I know a lot about other cases like this one in particular, but I do think that this is part of a line of cases that are attempting to hold many of our most elite and venerated colleges and universities to be accountable for the fact that they have what they have, that Harvard is what Harvard is because of the expropriated labor of enslaved people. So unfortunately, I can't say more about how this particular case has sparked going forward, but I do see it as part of a longer line and making sure that our most elite institutions start to make reparations for the harm that they've done and for the fact that who they are and what they have was built on the exploitation of enslaved people, the taking of native lands. There's so many things that these universities are, that they can claim their eliteness and their specialness, but they're doing it on the fact that they have gotten these ill-gotten gains.
Question in the back over there.
I had a question on the same track as Dale's, which was for the emotional distress claims. Do you think that is going to rely on the familial connection there, or would that be able to be used broader for, you know, any sort of material that was misappropriated from certain cultures, to have them, you know, either surrendered to representatives from, you know, Black culture, from Native American culture, or does it rely entirely on the familial claim to have that emotional distress claim?
I can speak at least to a part of that, and Tyler, that with that, if you read the opinion, and I know legal opinions are not the most exciting to read. However, this one does have some fireworks. It was essentially crushing Harvard and meant to verbally, and also I think legally. So now Tammy has an opportunity. And a big part of what the emotional distress claim is based on was Harvard's treatment of Tammy from the very beginning of her outreach, her requests, her letters, her contacts, and in connection with the actual lawsuit. They felt she was treated abominably, horribly, and was put through far more than any human being should. So it's an interesting read. I think perhaps in some ways novel, but getting to what Latoya was speaking of, there may be other ways that justice can be reached, and it may not be the perfect way, but if a door is opened such as this, Harvard at least may be made, have to take responsibility for some of the actions and intentional actions that they took against Tammy throughout. David, did you have something to add there? I just felt.
Well, I'm glad you said that. If you read this opinion, it is really goes after Harvard. I mean, that's what most of the opinion is. And there are some, you know, legal considerations about who should own the photograph, but really it's about how badly they've treated Tammy.
Thank you for showing this amazing a slightly depressing film. While watching it, I just had like a series of sparks, thinking about the Henrietta Lacks situation and thinking about, Indian or Native American remains and how many museums and institutions refuse to return those. And this also reminded me of revenge porn and the idea that someone who, has been victimized has no rights to the asset that was the nexus of their victimization. So I'm wondering, is there a possible case, particularly now that there are actual states that have revenge porn laws on the books, that this issue could come up again and have a more justice focused outcome?
I love to hear what Latoya says. Oh, there you are. Hi.
So I want to preface this with saying that I'm not an expert in even thinking about revenge porn or what have you, but I do think it brings up really interesting legal questions as to who owns or who should be the owner when someone has been particularly wronged, and part of the wrong in and of itself is the taking of the photograph, right? And if revenge, if I could see how it could be possible to take the lessons that we have from thinking about revenge porn and putting it into some of these situations, in the sense that the taking of the photograph itself was a harm. And if the taking of the photograph itself was a harm, and Papa Renty would be, he would be entitled to some kind of restitution for that harm, then we would hope that his family would then be able to get that benefit of that restitution, because of course he's no longer here. And so in a way, just thinking about that particular question and trying to make that analogy, I don't know the specific legal ways of thinking about that, but to me, that does sound like it could be a somewhat fruitful lane to go down, at least to think about if that might be some way, at least even to frame the problem, even if it doesn't have a particular legal import, even if it's not something that we can actually take to the courts. I do think it's a very interesting way of framing these types of cases.
I just wanted to add, Latoya, as you were talking, so many things were going through my head. I tend to look at these things from, as I said, a lens of copyright law, and that is strict in how it interprets the taking of a photograph and who the owner is. But I started thinking about control of the product, which has become such an important issue now. Just one instance, and it doesn't even begin to come anywhere close to a harm type situation that we're talking about here with these daguerreotypes. But we've seen a lot of cases involving images. I'll just use celebrities, where a paparazzi takes a photo of a celebrity and the celebrity posts it on their Instagram. So it's their image, it's themselves, but they don't own the photo. And then the paparazzi sues the celebrity for posting a photo of themselves. And I just said that to bring about thinking or thought about control. And what I think is so important with these daguerreotypes is I do hope Tammy gets some kind of restitution or reparations, but I can understand her feeling like she wants to control those daguerreotypes. She doesn't want Harvard to decide how these horrific images are displayed or not displayed. And I think it does come to that issue of control, particularly, as Latoya pointed out, when you're talking about the means through which a photo is taken is through something criminal or harmful. And I would think perhaps it would be a novel legal theory, but maybe there'll be an opening for that at some point in the future. I think in this case, I would certainly welcome it.
Any other questions?
All right.
Let's thank
Well,
everybody on stage. I want to thank a few additional people off stage, the team at James Bridges. Thank you so much for supporting us. And down here, my team, and all the teams from PILP and CRS. Thank you so much. And one announcement, there is another screening of another documentary that was a client of our doc film legal clinic. It brings up many of the issues that came up during today's conversation, actually. And that screening will be in this same theater on Monday, February 13th. So if you'd like, find anybody with one of these atomic celery bags and we will give you the RSVP link and you can sign up. So hopefully you'll join us there. And with that, I think, we have some nice dinner outside for everybody. Please, mingle, ask all of our panelists questions, and we'll see you on Monday. Can't hear you. Somewhere here.
Thank you.
Thank you.